Anything? There we go. There we go. Hi, everybody. Hey, great to have you here. I want to welcome everybody who's in Isani. Thank you so much for coming out to church today. And if you're watching us online, hey, it's great to have you that way as well. Appreciate you checking in. We are continuing our series, Storyteller, and we're doing this for 9 weeks, kind of like through most of the summer, because Jesus told so many stories. He did, and Jesus told stories that were extremely relevant for the day in which he was here on this earth, and he told stories to people that everybody would understand. He told a lot of stories about farming and about crops and about sheep and different things that people would understand at that day, because his whole purpose for telling stories was to get across a spiritual truth, to get across something that might be harder to understand, something that like God does. Or he told stories about God, but he told them stories in ways that we can understand, like analogies. He'd say, hey, the kingdom of God is just like this, and then he would tell us stories so that we could understand them. So we're going through some of these stories, and our whole goal here is that each one of us can learn or gain or appreciate or be drawn to some of the spiritual things that Jesus really wanted us to know, that they're extremely important for our lives, and he did it through these stories. So we're going through these, hope that you and I can gain some insight from it. Now, it was Memorial Weekend. That was, 2 weekends ago. My oldest daughter, Leah, and I were coming back. The whole family was up north at the cabin, and we were coming back for church. And so we were coming back Saturday night for church on Sunday. And as we were on our way back, we were just driving in the car, and I just asked Leah. Now, Leah's the one with the quadruplets, and then the other daughter, there's 5 kids, and I think she has, or I've talked about this before, that they live on one income, and they have 5 kids, and they're extremely organized and all that. And we were driving home, and I said, Leah, how do you do all of this? They go to the cabin a few times a year, like 5-6 times a year at the cabin. When we were coming back, she was just preparing for the quad's birthday. Was the weekend later, or was last weekend. And I asked her, I said, financially, how do you guys do all this financially? How can you? And she said to me just as plain, it was just so clear, it almost made me feel dumb. She just said, well, Dad, it's not like we don't know it's coming. We planned for it all year. We know we're going to go to the cabin 5 times this summer. We know that the kids have a birthday every year, and we know what day it falls on. And we know that Christmas happens every December, never missed, every day. So, Dad, we know these things are coming, so what they do is every single week, every paycheck, they put a little money aside for the calendar, for the things that are coming that year, so that it never surprises them and, oh my gosh, the kids' birthday is here and we didn't know it was coming and we're not prepared. They're always prepared because they know these things are coming, they happen every year, and they're ready for it. And by the way, I just want to throw a plug in here for the financial class at Access Church. Is amazing. Leah and her husband learned this stuff from the financial class here. So the next time it comes, I just really encourage you to go to it. It's really great, financially anyway, for them to plan. But, as she was telling me this, I thought, that is amazing that nothing really takes them by surprise, because they know it's coming, so they prepare ahead of time, and they know it's coming. And I was just thinking about how many things in life, how much better life would be if we would prepare for things that we know are coming. Because so oftentimes we get it's a tragedy. It's like, oh my gosh, it's just a tragedy. Everything's, bad because, it's Christmas and I'm just not ready. And sometimes our life gets all tragic and all these bad things because we just simply didn't prepare for something that we know was coming. And just last night I was reminded of Katrina. When Katrina happened, there were so many people that were caught off guard. There were so many people that stayed at home. There were warnings, a week ahead of time, plenty of time to warn everybody that, this is going to be a terrible storm, and for everybody to move out, to leave for a while. And there's so many residents, they've been through these storms before, hurricanes, and they just ignored the warnings. They ignored the warnings. Oh, it'll be okay. They weren't listening, and so a catastrophe happened, and they were caught up in it. And so many people, had to be rescued by helicopter and boat and stuff because they just didn't heed the warning. And here's my question for us, for all of us, myself included, is this: are you the kind of person who, when something happens in life, it just catches you off guard and it's a tragedy, even though you knew it was coming? Are you the kind of person that if you know something's coming, you prepare for it? Because it shouldn't be a shock to us. I mean, it shouldn't be a shock. Tax day happens every year, right? This shouldn't catch us by surprise. We should be prepared for it. And what kind of person are you? Are you the kind of person that's always caught off guard? You're always under the gun? Or are you the kind of person that prepares? Because Jesus is telling us to prepare for something in today's story that is cataclysmic. It's huge. And as a matter of fact, Jesus tells us that there's something coming. And he's telling this to his followers. He's speaking to further generations, to us today, about something that's coming, and it's going to affect every one of us. And the reason Jesus is telling us is so that it doesn't take us by surprise, so that we know it's coming. He even told his followers, he said, hey, when this happens, don't be surprised, because I told you ahead of time that it was going to happen. And what is this thing that's going to happen? There's going to be an end to this whole world system as we know it. And I know that might be a little hard to swallow. I know that sounds, doomsday. I know that once in a while we hear things of, oh, there's going to be an end of the world, and there's going to be an end, and it's all going to be done. And some people really kind of mock that or joke at that, and maybe you never really took it serious. But maybe you never really knew that Jesus talked about this, that it was God's whole plan the whole time, that when he created mankind on earth and he created the earth, this was not intended to be permanent, that it was for a specific period of time, and that when time ran out, it would be over. And Jesus is telling his disciples this at one time they're walking. As a matter of fact, one time they were coming out of the temple. I mean, the temple in Jerusalem was amazing. It was hundreds of feet high. One whole wall was gold. I mean, really, was layered with gold. This temple was absolutely beautiful, absolutely massive, and it was huge. And they were coming out of the temple one day, and Jesus told his disciples, they were saying, this temple's so beautiful. And Jesus said, yeah, but you know what? Someday, it's going to be nothing. It's going to be rubble. Everything you see is going to be destroyed. And then after Jesus told them that there is an end, that it's all going to come to an end, they were walking across this valley called the Kidron Valley, and they went up to the Mount of Olives. And from the Mount of Olives, you could see the temple from there. It wasn't that far, and the temple stood up on the Temple Mount, and it was beautiful. And you can imagine, as they're walking across this valley, imagine what his followers were thinking. Oh my gosh, it's all going to come to an end? Like everything's going to be destroyed and the world's going to come to an end. It's all going to burn up and it's going to be done. They're thinking about that the whole time. And we're going to pick up the story. It says, as Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, probably a little embarrassed, because they don't know this. Tell us, they said, when will this happen, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? I mean, just picture this. They're on the Mount of Olives. They're looking across the valley, and there's the temple up on the mount. And they're thinking about this whole time, and they kind of whisper to Jesus, like, Jesus, it's a little upsetting, that this is all going to come to an end. Like, can you tell us when this is going to happen? I mean, this almost sounds like, this is drastic news. When is this going to happen? And what are the signs? I mean, are we going to know ahead of time? Are we going to know when this is about to happen? I mean, can you give us any more information? You just kind of laid a big one on us here. And can you tell us any more about what this is going to happen? And so Jesus goes on and explains a little bit. He said, Jesus answered, watch out that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, claiming that I am the Messiah, and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. So Jesus gives these couple warnings to them first. First, guys, listen, about the end coming. There's going to be a lot of religious people coming, a lot of people thinking they're the way, a lot of people, you'll hear of that. That's normal. I mean, that's going to happen. That people are going to, it may increase as the end draws near. This might be an increasing thing. But don't listen to people saying, hey, I'm the one or Messiah, or here's a new religion, or here's the answer, here's the thing. He said, don't be distracted like that. And then he said, there's going to be wars and rumors of wars. That's life. War will always be. Now, it's not a good thing. Jesus isn't saying it's a good thing. He's just saying this is the way it is. And so when you see a war, I mean, I can imagine people, well, World War I and World War II, imagine them thinking, this has got to be the end. I mean, the world's going to be done, And he said, hey, don't let that freak you out too much. But then he goes on, and he starts to say some things to watch out for, that these things are going to be increasing. And so he says, but the end is still to come. Oh, here's what he says. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of the birth pains. Now, he's just kind of getting into the beginning of it. When you see these things in increasing amount, when you see this stuff, he says, when you see nation rising up against nation more than ever before. And what nation means, it actually means people group. When you see people groups rise up against other people groups, and you see this growing, and this becomes more of an issue in our world where people groups are fighting against other people groups, and you can just imagine in your mind what that might look like. And he said that when you see this increasing this week, hey, this is a sign of the beginning of the earth, of the labor pains. This is a sign of the beginning of the end. And look up for that. He says, when you see famines increasing, that it becomes more of an issue in our world. It becomes bigger and bigger. When you see earthquakes, I mean, there's always been famines and earthquakes, but when you see these increasing, this is a sign to you that this is the beginning of the birth pains. And here's the thing with the beginning of birth pains. Once those labor pains start, there's a baby coming, right? There's no turning back. There's not like this. There is a baby coming. And so Jesus is telling them, watch out for these things, that when they increase and you see them more and more on the earth, hey, this is the beginning of this is going to happen. And this thing's going to happen. It's coming. There's nothing you can do to stop it. It is coming in this world. And there are many other prophecies. I'm not going to get into all this. I'm not a person who studies the end times. There are people who do. I personally don't study a lot of it, but I do know that, Daniel, Ezekiel, Revelation, there's different books in the Bible that talk more about the very end and the judgment on this world. I believe a lot of those things, though, are talking about the actual time of judgment. I believe that this Jesus coming back or taking his people out of this world will happen before that. But he says, when you see these things happen, he also mentions that when the gospel is preached throughout the world, then you will know that the end is near, and all kinds of other things that are happening. Here's the point. There are people who study this and say, hey, we are, well, I'll tell you this, we're closer now than we've ever been, obviously. But some people think it's really, really close. I mean, really close. But nobody knows. But I do know enough of it to say this. I believe every single thing's been fulfilled. There's nothing that's waiting to happen. It's just a matter of, is this the day or isn't this the day? This thing's coming. There's going to be an end of the world, and it's going to happen suddenly. But Jesus says this that really kind of complicates it. He says, but about that day, as he's answering the disciples what they said, but about that day or hour, no one knows. Not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, he himself didn't know, but only the Father. So Jesus actually answers their question, and he says, you'll see some signs of when it's about ready. You'll see the beginning of labor pains, but the actual due date, nobody knows. So here this huge thing's going to happen, the end of everything that we know. And he says, but nobody knows on what day or what hour or when that thing's going to happen. And here's the tragedy. This is the tragedy for so many of us. Because we don't know the day or the hour, we tend to act like it's not going to happen. And Jesus gives this analogy about Noah and the flood. He says, as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. In other words, he says, just like what happened with the flood and with Noah in the Old Testament, if you're not familiar with that story, you should probably read that one, where God flooded the earth and he saved Noah and his family through the ark. And he said, you know what, it's going to be this end of the world thing, this when it's all over, it's going to be just like that. What was that like? For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. And this is tragic. Jesus said, just like what happened in Noah's day. Noah told people, he told them for decades that there's going to be a flood on the earth, that God is calling people, that there was so much sin in the world. People rejected God so much. That was the whole purpose for the flood, that, you know what, all of mankind on the earth, it just said, we don't want nothing to do with God. We don't want God in our lives at all. We don't believe in God, we want to serve false gods. And Noah warned them. He warned them and warned them that this is coming, this is coming. And he said, turn your lives to God. Be prepared and turn your lives to God. And people just ignored him. They ignored him so much that their lives went on like there was nothing going to happen. They were marrying and giving in marriage. They were going. Basically, what Jesus says, people were carrying on their lives like there was nothing looming. Like there was no flood coming at all. They just disregarded what God had said, and they lived their lives, didn't care, just not even noticing or caring about that this is going to happen until the day Noah went right into the ark, and this was it. They didn't even realize it until it was too late. And Jesus said that's what it's going to be like at the coming of the Lord. That people will be just living their lives, unconcerned that there is an end coming, unconcerned that you're going to meet God someday, that there's a day coming that we are all going to meet God. And people live their lives like, so what? Doesn't matter. So what are we to do with this? I mean, God says, Jesus is saying that there's an end to all this. There is an end, and it's going to come suddenly. What should we do? What can we do? We don't know when it's going to happen. So Jesus says this. Tells this story. Understand this. If the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So, and here's his point, so you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. So Jesus tells them that this is going to happen, that there's going to be an end. We don't know when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. And therefore, here's what Jesus says, then be ready. Live your life ready. Because we don't know. This could happen this afternoon. It could happen in an hour. It could happen in 100 years. I don't know. We don't know. We do know it's close, but it could happen. And here's the question. Are you ready? I mean, are you ready to meet God today? Are you, like if it were to, right now, boom, if it were to happen, the end of all this would be here. We would all be standing before God. Are you ready to stand before God? And I know some people, Jesus went on and told some other stories about, being ready. And here was the whole point of all of that stuff. And it was saying like, well, you should live your life ready Well, what does that look like to live your life ready? It's are you ready to meet God? And if you were right now, if the rapture, if the end of the world, if God didn't come back today, we could still meet God. You know, we're all going to leave this world. We don't know if the end of the world's coming today, or we don't know if you're going to have an aneurysm and fall over dead. You know, we're all going to meet God. And sometimes we can live life like, that's way in the future. That's way in the future. Do we know that? It could be today. It could be in a moment. My dad, my best friends growing up, I had best friends. My dad and his dad were best friends. And this kid, we were 19 years old at the time, and him and my friend and I were getting ready to go out partying, and we were in the foyer of my dad's house, and my dad probably remembers this. And he was talking to my buddy about getting right with God, about putting your trust in Jesus Christ so your sins are forgiven, so that you could see God. I mean, you could be in the presence of God. And that's why Jesus came, that if we believe in him. And my dad told him all of that, and here's what he said. Now, he was like a son to my dad. I mean, we were almost like brothers. And here's what he said to my dad. He said, Doug, I know what you're telling me is true, but I'm 19 years old. Dad, you remember that? I'm 19 years old. He said, I got a lot of time. I know, Doug, you're right, and I'm going to do that, and I believe in Jesus. I think you're right, but hey, right now I'm 19 years old. I got a lot of life to live, and it's just like, hey, I'm not ready for that. But Doug, don't you worry. Someday I will. It was just a few weeks later, my dad called me and asked me if I was sitting down because my buddy was killed instantly at work. We don't know. That's real life. We don't know if God's coming back today. He can. And this would be the end of everything. You don't know if you're going to make it home from this service. We don't know. So Jesus says, be ready at all times. To be ready. Are you ready to meet God? Well, what do you want to be ready? What is being ready? Kevin, tell me. I want to be ready. Being ready to meet God is to have him as a priority in your life. He's God. And listen, here's the thing. Let me tell you what not being ready is. Not being ready is living our lives like God doesn't exist. Living our lives like God's just a second thought. And it's so easy in our culture. We live in a culture of entertainment. We live in a culture of pleasure. We live in a culture of busy. And it's so easy for all of us to be the last thing on our mind is God. It seems, especially in the summertime, but, hey, we're all doing stuff, and it's great. Life's good. We're enjoying life. God can be a second thought all the time. God can be, well, I don't have time for God right now, but boy, someday I will. Living ready is living connected to God and him being the priority of our life. What's the priority of God in our life? Well, it doesn't mean you walk around like this all day long. Nobody can do that, and God doesn't want us to. But being ready to meet God is having God as the first most important thing in life. Being ready to meet God is being busy and active in the things of God. And here's something we probably don't think about much. But I want you to just think about this, because the Bible says this, that every single one of us, God has a purpose for us. None of us were just born by accident. None of us just wander around aimlessly in life with no purpose, with no reason for living. And there's a lot of things to do in this world, and you might have a family, and might have a really important job where you might think you have purpose. But God has designed every one of us for a purpose bigger than ourselves. That many of us may ignore it, but God has a very specific purpose for your life. And that purpose has to do with eternity. Not just the things of this world, but eternity. That purpose is we were born to have an active, healthy relationship with God, where we talk to God on a regular basis, where we experience God. That's part of our purpose, is to have this active relationship with God. And to use our gifts and our talents and our abilities in this world to do something that for eternity and for God with our lives. This morning we have a pre-service meeting with a lot of the volunteers here that make church happen. And I just asked them as we're sitting there, I said, why do you serve? And why do you serve? And why? And we kind of went around and just talked about why individuals serve. So I told them, you don't get paid for it. It's inconvenient. You have to change your schedule. Why would you do it? The responses were amazing. Because some of the people said, because I feel an obligation. I feel a purpose from God, or almost an obligation or even a duty to use the gifts that God's given me in my life more than just for myself. I feel this obligation, this duty to use what God's given me for His kingdom and for His work. And as other people said, hey, it's like, it's to give back. I feel this giving back. Many of them said that because of the fulfillment that it brings, the fulfillment on the inside, knowing that I am doing something that's going to be bigger than me, last longer than me, it's for eternity. And for doing that, and it was great to just hear all of those things. But here's the point. Living a life ready to see God is living our lives in a close relationship with God and being involved in a part of what God's doing, a part of an eternal plan for our lives. And that's part of being ready to meet God. Are you ready to meet God if it was today? The Apostle Paul actually talked about this very thing, about this priority that we have life and we live life and God's given us life and we're so blessed. But there's a priority in life to be connected and serving God above everything else. And he says it this way, and it's kind of alarming almost. First, he says, what I mean, brothers and sisters, is that the time is short. And listen, this is Paul writing to Christians. The time is short. From now on, those who have wives should live as if they do not. Those who mourn as if they did not. Those who are happy as if they were not. Those who buy something as if it were not theirs to keep. Those who use the things of this world as if not engrossed in them. Why? For this world in its present form is passing away. Now this might seem kind of harsh, but if you're married, to live your life like you're not, all he's not saying don't treat your spouse good. He's saying this: if your spouse is causing you to not put God as a priority, that you need to put God first. That God and the things of God and His giftings in your life are more important, that they should be first and then your spouse. And he says about those who mourn. Listen, his point is this: if the things of this world are causing you pain and causing you to mourn and the disappointments of this world, he said, this world is not our home. Don't let that bother you. Don't mourn, because this isn't permanent. Live with the perspective of eternity. That this life is short is not it. If you're going through struggles in this world, put your priorities in the world to come, in the future. And the same with those who are happy. He says, with those who are happy, live as if you weren't. What he means is this: not to not be happy, but if you're getting all of your happiness from your world, from living this life, if this life's going so well for you, be careful, don't be too happy, because this world doesn't last long. If things are going so well for you and you're happy, he's saying, change your happiness to eternal things. God wants us to live life, and we know that, but it's living ready, is living with a priority that God is first and His calling on my life, what He's called me to do, this whole idea of that I have a purpose in my life bigger than myself. And he says, hey, you can buy stuff. I mean, those who buy something, as if it were not theirs to keep. Listen, we can buy stuff, we can have stuff. But this world is not lasting long. Don't cling to those things so much that it's yours, so much value, that my happiness, my joy, my value is in these things, because these things aren't going to last. Use them, but don't own them. The next thing, that people are he says that for those who are, but not engrossed in them. If you use the things of the world, but don't be engrossed in them. Listen, hobbies, this is a prime one for me, that I really love hunting and stuff, but you know what? His warning here is this. You can do these things and you can have hobbies, but don't be so engrossed in them that they define your life. That's not who you are. God created us for something bigger, that we have more purpose in life than our hobbies. Do your hobbies, but don't be so engrossed in them that you're missing the things of God. Don't be so engrossed in your hobbies that God is not first in life. And he comes down to this. Why? For this world in its present form is passing away. This life is temporary. We don't belong here. We are just passing through. Every one of us. I think it's interesting going to funerals. We've all been to them. Probably not your own, but you've been to a funeral. You will be at your own, though. I'm always amazed at the pictures. I was did a funeral just the other day for a 94-year-old. What a great long life. But there are wedding pictures there. I mean, from the early 1900s, and like, wow. You see how young those people are. And like, through pictures, you can see a whole life, 94 years on a picture board. And every one of us, we start out here, we go through life. There's an end. There is an end. God could come back today, or we could leave this world today. And the question is, are you ready? Are you ready? Is God the priority of your life? And I want to encourage you to be ready. To be ready. To actually for each one of us, to make a change in our life today. To kind of make a paradigm shift. That this life is, I can enjoy life and live life, but that's not the reason I'm here. There's something bigger for me, to be engaged in God and be serving God and be using my gifts and be talking to God on a regular basis. That you and I can make an adjustment in our priorities today. That yes, I can do these things in life, but God is first. But God is first, and then those things. With that, I want to turn it over to Shaheen to go ahead and close the service in Isanti. And if you could just bow your head, let's talk to God. Father, it's so easy to get up from here, to go out and just, like it's in the days of Noah, to just live life, not even thinking that there's an end coming, and to have that day surprise us. I pray, Father, that we would all live ready to meet you. That when you come or we leave, that we would be doing the purpose for which you called us to do. That our lives are more than just this world. We are eternal beings. Father, I pray that you would draw every one of our hearts. Pray that you would personally draw me and to show me where I'm off in my priorities. To show me the areas in life that you are not first. Help each one of us to put you first. And may we make a decision and a choice to put you first in our day, in the things that we do, in the way we spend our money, how we spend our time, what we do with our talents. I pray, Father, that you would steer each one of us to putting you first. In Jesus' name, amen.